Okay, so the next step when it comes to core training beyond the isometric movements, I like to just start with some body weight movements if they're capable of doing them. So, as opposed to a lot of people who will start people with more crunch focus and trying to isolate the abdominals, my goal is actually to introduce the abdominals and the hip flexors into working together because that's how they're supposed to function. A lot of people have tight hips and develop an anterior pelvic tilt actually because they do so much isolation and cosmetic abdominal work. You know, your quarter range of motion crunches, that sort of stuff, that are designed to actually exclude the hip flexors, which can be a big problem when it comes to functional development, I guess you could say. I don't really like to use the word functional, but I guess it's kind of applicable in this situation. So what I do is basically a 4-stage assessment, and I wish I could remember where I got this assessment from. It's definitely not my own making. Stole it from somebody else, but it works really, really well. So the first stage to this is going to be laying flat on the back. Feet are going to be bent at about a 45-degree angle, similar to what you would get if you were just going to do, your regular bodybuilding style crunching movements. But what we're going to do is you're going to take your hands, put them about 3 or 4 inches off the floor, and what I want you to do is press your back into the ground and flex up until your chest and your knees are getting very, very close to each other. So it's a much more drawn out range of motion than what you would typically get out of a crunch. Flex all the way up. Here, and the hands should stay about 3 to 4 inches off of the ground, so you're not going to use your hands to develop any sort of momentum. Okay, your hands are just simply there just kind of as a reference point for what you're doing. All the way up. And the idea is that you want to be able to keep the feet on the ground. Okay, typically if the feet start popping up off of the ground about halfway through the repetition, usually means that your hips are very, very tight and very, very weak. So most people that do this will have that problem almost right off the bat. And it just comes from so much time being used in an excluded positioning for all of your abdominal training. So it's more abdominal training than core training where you want to use both together. So that's going to be the first stage in it. And then I'll go to the second stage. At this point, we're actually going to fully extend the legs. Same thing. Hands are in the same position. Bring yourself almost all the way back. Flex yourself up until you're all the way in this position. And again, same thing. We're looking for watching the heels popping up off the ground, and we're watching for any sort of momentum generated movement through the arms. Okay, so that's stage 2. If someone can do stage 2, we'll go on to stage 3, which is going to be crossing the arms tight across the chest. Now with this, you got to make sure that the hands are in contact with the shoulders and the elbows are drawn down in toward the chest and the abdomen. If you leave space here, I promise you everybody that does this will use this little bit to flap them up and get their momentum going. Draw everything in nice and tight, pull yourself up. Again, pretty much at this rate, the elbows should touch the thighs. If you're keeping your heels down on the ground like you should, you'll notice when I come up in the last 2 variations, the knees bend a little bit. So they start straight, they end up a little bit bent. That's fine, that's pretty normal. A lot of the hip engagement comes coming right up off of the ground, which is where you usually see people's feet shoot up, is right off the first few inches of the movement. Now the final variation, at this point, if someone can pull off repetitions of this, they're pretty well developed in the abdominals, and there's not much more need for body weight style movements. You can take the arms, put them straight up over your head. I like to kind of clasp the hands together again so you're not running into any tendency to want to swing. And you want to actually keep the upper arm straight out from the ear. Okay? Now if you can do this, this is adding the weight of your arms to the movement. Same thing. Flexing yourself up so my hips pop up, or my feet pop up a little bit off the ground on the way up. So this is the most challenging variation of this movement. Okay, so knee roll assessment there, steps 1 through 4. Find whichever one they're unable to do, and then step it back and have them do, sets of about 8 to 12 reps. So if they can't do 3, they're going to work on step 2 for sets of 8 to 12. Keep trying step 3 through every workout until they're able to do it, and then just continue all the way up through step 4.
So how do you leave lower back pain when you're laying straight like this because you get the space.
Okay.
How would you relieve that back?
Okay, one of two things. Most of the time, if the lower back is weak, which is means it's taking a lot of the burden on sit-up type movements, that means one, you just need to develop the lower back. Okay, so that's just a byproduct of another issue. Okay, and sometimes it can be a little bit of a flexibility thing, sometimes it's actually just a technique thing. When you come up, you want to actually focus on pushing your lower back down into the ground. Okay, so there should be very, very little moments in the movements, no matter whether you're doing step 1, 2, 3, or 4, where there is an arch in the lower back. So go ahead and lay all the way down, plant your feet on the ground. So we'll do step 1, so you're gonna plant your feet just like you start a crunch. Go ahead and lay back. Now in this position, I want you to consciously push your lower back down into the ground. It's gonna kind of start your abdominals flex a little bit. Now even as you come up to do your first repetition, don't necessarily think so much about sitting up, but think about pushing the lower back down to the ground. Okay, and that's gonna actually fire your body up. Okay, so you feel a difference, so it keeps your lower back rounded. And even as you come down, try and let everything kind of unfold. So a lot of people, when they lower themselves down, you know, they do find on the way up and then the lower back just arches like mad on the way down. You want to actually, just the same way you came up, where you're kind of rolling everything up, you want to let everything unfold from the bottom up. So the lower back touches first and then touches all the way up to the shoulder blades. Okay, so you're fine on step 1. So let's go ahead and try step 2. So now you're gonna do feet straight out. Same thing, hands are a couple inches above the ground. And same thing, press the lower back into the ground to bring yourself up. And then you'll feel your knees. If you keep your feet in the same spot, your knees will bend a little bit on the way up.
They're sliding.
Okay, yeah, with the wooden floor that may or may not happen. But I mean, if you're using, you know, like a non-stick, like a traditional gym floor surface, carpet, whatever, if your feet are planted, or if you're even using a wall to brace your feet against, your knees may bend a little bit. That's fine. That's not a big deal to have happen. So go ahead and do just one more of these. Good. And again, same thing, just letting everything unroll from the bottom up. Now step 3 is going to be where you cross the arms across the chest and pull the elbows down. So that way you're not using any little butterfly flaps to get yourself up. See a little bit of a spring on there. A lot of times that just means this is the point where your hips are weaker than the movement is allowing.
I'm determined.
But you'd be surprised at how quickly, you know, people will get the first couple stages of this movement down once you start introducing hip-based movements into their core training rather than just the cosmetic, you know, muscle and fitness, Flex Magazine style ab training. Because the abs aren't intended to work all by themselves. They're intended to work with, you know, the entire core musculature, and that includes the hip flexors. Okay, so let's go ahead and try step 4. This is going to be arms straight up over the head, and you want to keep basically the biceps should be by your ears. If you feel that deviating at all, now this is one where you do have to be pretty conscious of the space in your lower back. Because your arms are put up over your head, that tends to draw an arch into a lot of people's lower back. So you got to really focus on pushing everything down to eliminate some of the space, even when you're just laying in this position before you started. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm thinking
Now,
if I can do it.
now let's go ahead and see it. This is the most challenging step of this assessment. So maybe I would be surprised if like 25% of the people that go through this assessment can actually even get a full repetition with this part of the movement. So even a lot of athletes and relatively strong abdominal people have a hard time with it because of the demand on the hip flexors to help fire everything up off there too. So, and that's usually because either the hips are tight or weak, or usually a combination of both. So that's a little 4-stage assessment of that. That's the basics of what everybody starts with when they're starting with core training with me, is going through, you know, your planks, your side planks, and then that 4-stage assessment to figure out where they are. And then we'll develop a program from